All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening to all of you. My name is William Roca. I am the Director of Programs at Village Preservation. We're very excited to be joined by On This Spot New York for New York City for this evening's presentation from Joan Mitchell to the Guerilla Girls, 20th Century Downtown Women Artists. Now, before I introduce our guests this evening, if you're unfamiliar with Village Preservation, just let me take a moment to tell you a little bit about us. We were founded back in 1980, and we work to celebrate, document, and preserve the special architectural, historical, and cultural heritage of Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo. We've helped secure landmark designation now for over 1,300 buildings in our neighborhoods, and we host 75 to 80 free programs like this throughout the year. Now, we are a member-based organization, so we can always use your support. For our members out there watching this evening, a very big thank you to you, to your continued support of the work that we do. If you haven't yet become a member or interested in becoming a member, you can scan that QR code that you see on your screen there. It will take you to the website. You can learn a little bit more about our membership and the work that we do, the advocacy work, future upcoming programs. And whether you decide to become a member or not, we also have an array of amazing resources free to use, especially a bunch of virtual maps that allow you to explore the history and people in the neighborhoods, and you can even put together your own walking tour. At the end of 2024, we released a special Fifth Avenue map to celebrate 200 years of Fifth Avenue. It was born in 1825. So please go to villagepreservation.org and just learn a little bit more about us, and we would always appreciate your support. Now, for upcoming programs, next week, Wednesday, February 26th at 6 p.m., we have this wonderful program to help celebrate Black History Month, the new Brownies book, A Love Letter to Black Families. And this is inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois, who had offices within Greenwich Village at 70th Fifth Avenue. And the original Brownies book was published there. So this beautiful, gorgeous book is an update to that. So if you're interested in joining us for this webinar, it will also be a webinar program. Please go to villagepreservation.org, sign up, and we would love to have you join us for that program next week. Also, it is time for the 2025 Village Award nominations. If you're not familiar with the Village Awards, this is a chance to help celebrate a local individual, a business, an organization that you think helps make our neighborhoods a better place, has made a positive contribution. It's kind of like our little village Oscars, so to speak. So since 1991, when the Village Awards started, we've had over 260 awards handed out. You can go to villagepreservation.org, click on events, and then you'll be able to see the annual meeting and awards. Click on that and you can submit a nomination right online. Very easy to do. You have until March 10th to submit those nominations. So if you know someone or you love a local business or an organization that you really would like to see appreciated, please go ahead and submit that nomination for the award. Now, just some quick housekeeping with here on Zoom. Everyone's cameras are off and you are on mute, but we do want to make this an interactive part of the program this evening. So please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature to submit your questions. We would love to have those questions from you, and those will be asked towards the end of this evening's program. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce this evening's guest, Loretta Howard. She's the co-founder and executive director of On This Spot NYC, Stories of Pioneering Women Artists. With over 35 years of experience as a gallery owner, she's worked extensively with artists, collectors, and institutions, fostering connections that advance the arts. She holds a master's degree in art history from New York University's Institute of Fine Arts, where she also pursued doctoral studies. In 1983, graduate of Amherst College. She was raised in Greenwich Village. She attended Grace Church School, Village Community School, and St. Anne's in Brooklyn. Even though now she calls the Upper West Side home, she's never left behind the village. I don't think any of us ever do, where her passion for art and community first took root. I will stop sharing here. And a very warm welcome to you, Loretta. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thanks so much, William. It's wonderful to be here.
So as we get started this evening, can you just tell us a little bit more about On This Spot? And folks, don't worry, we're going to be sharing lots of cool stuff this evening. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the project, how it got started, and why you felt it was important to create it in the first place.
Well, it probably is because I grew up in the village. I think that we lived at 32 West 10th Street, as you said, between 5th and 6th. This is in the 1960s and the 1970s, Renwick Row. I'm sure many of you know it. We lived on the top floor, 5-story walk up. And Leonard Bernstein had previously lived in our apartment. In fact, the movie Maestro opens with a recreation of the apartment, but the big skylight that we had was right there. And that really speaks to the fact that at that time, the village was still an inexpensive place for artists and musicians and writers. My mother was a writer. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that I went to Grace Church School and later Village Community School, because it really does underscore the fact that I'm a village girl. And it's that kind of rich New York history that really fascinates me, always has. And it's just exactly that On the Spot is trying to get to, that the hidden art history behind closed doors that we hope we reveal. And I also just really very much want to say that village preservation is doing such important good work in preserving my beloved village. So thank you. You do a great job.
Oh, thank you. No, we have an amazing team of people, and we love the work that you do. Well, should we play the intro video then from On
Yes.
the Spot to let people learn a little bit more here? So let me see if I can get this set up here properly and the internet behaves itself.
On This Spot, New York City, stories of pioneering women artists. On This Spot is a map of a woman's revolution in art, neighborhood by neighborhood, decade by decade. From the 1950s to the 2000s. Men made the rules and women broke the rules. Again and again. A diverse and inclusive group. We are retelling art history with the stories of these women, and we are putting women on the map. Women artists changed the art world and changed New York City forever. We take you there, behind the closed doors, the cold water flats, the lofts of SoHo, the clubs and the cafes of the village, the galleries, Lower East Side, Chelsea, Uptown, Downtown, where it happened, how it happened, on this spot. Come with us and meet the women artists who broke boundaries, women who astonished the city and astonished the world. These are their stories, and these are their places. Stand on the spot where history was made.
So I hope everyone was able to see that nice and clear. The internet was not being a pain. Now, why did you choose to focus on all these women artists? Why was it important to do this?
Well, women artists are underrepresented in the art world. I mean, the perception is that women artists have made huge gains, and there have been some gains, but they're still not exhibited in equal numbers to their male peers, and certainly not valued as highly. There are times at auction where the total sales of all women artists would equal just one Picasso painting. And if you take out the top five selling women artists, Joan Mitchell, Yayoi Kusama, Georgia O'Keeffe, Agnes Martin, Louise Bourgeois, then it's minuscule, the percentage of auction sales. And this is, $1 billion industry. So there's that. And then I can give you another example, which is that in the ninth edition of the History of Art by Jansen, right, the latest edition, there are 318 artists included, and only 27 are women.
Oh,
So that's less than 1%. And this is the textbook that we all used in college. So it's really striking. So our mission is to recenter the narratives of women artists, and we want to ensure their rightful place in art history. And we hope that On the Spot provides an opportunity to correct gender inequity and tell stories of women that you may never heard of before. Historically, women's work has always been viewed as inferior to men, and they've experienced all sorts of discrimination. I mean, institutionally from dealers and critics and curators and their male peers, but also at home. They're torn between being artists and mothers and wives and caregivers and homemakers. So that's why we chose to center on women.
well, I want to take this chance to share a little reel that your team put together very kindly for us from some of the great, amazing women that lived and worked in our neighborhoods here, the Village Preservation neighborhoods. I do want to call out Joan Mitchell. This month is her centennial, would have been her 100th birthday this month. So I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to play this video, folks. It's about 15 minutes or so, this clip of all these incredible, beautifully produced snippets. And please do go check out the On This Spot website. There are a ton more of these really gorgeously produced videos here. So just give me 1 second to share my screen here again. Here we go.
On This Spot, New York City, stories of pioneering women artists. Guerrilla Girls at the Palladium. The revolution had begun. On October 17, 1985, the Guerrilla Girls mounted a sprawling exhibition of women artists at the Palladium nightclub at 126 East 14th Street on the edge of the East Village. A call to arms, it featured an amazing roster of 100 well-known and emerging names. Included were Louise Bourgeois, Jane Dixon, Jenny Holzer, Louise Lawler, Lady Pink, Howardina Pindell, Faith Ringgold, Cindy Sherman, Kiki Smith, and Karen Finley. They called it the night the Palladium apologized. It was their first exhibition. The poster said, "Exhibition curated by Guerrilla Girls, the Women Artist Terrorist Organization." Who were the Guerrilla Girls? They were, and still are, an anonymous group of female artists who are devoted to fighting sexism and racial inequality in the art world. They formed in the spring of 1985. 7 women launching a collective to protest a Museum of Modern Art survey show of almost entirely male artists. They organized marches and made posters. Their infamous street poster campaign changed everything. Scathing and sarcastic, the posters used statistics, irrefutable facts and figures. These were wheat pasted to walls, phone booths, and galleries all over Lower Manhattan especially in SoHo and the East Village. Now, their posters from the 1980s are in major museum collections. Today, Guerrilla Girls stage lectures and protests, create billboards and wall projections, and continue to spread their righteous message. They famously asked, "Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum?" 30 years later, we are still asking the question. It took guerrilla warfare to make it happen. The Cedar Tavern, 24 University Place, Greenwich Village. For women, the downtown scene was the arena. As artists and writers, they needed a place to prove themselves on their own terms. And this stark tavern was the destination for intellectual sparring. After a talk at the club or an art opening, revelers would head for this rough-and-tumble bar eatery with $1-a-plate spaghetti dishes run by a former butcher and his brother. For both men and women, you had to be a tough guy to fit in. Big drinkers, big geniuses who get into fistfights. Painter Jackson Pollock's violent outbursts got him banned. Joan Mitchell stood her ground against the likes of Norman Bloom and Franz Klein. Beat poets, jazz musicians, and artists fill the booths, smoking cigarettes endlessly, arguing and seeking love and companionship each night until 4 a.m. Elaine de Kooning was a damn good painter. She also wrote damn good art criticism for Art News. Here, she faced down many a man, embracing debate. Famous artist Yayoi Kusama has lived her entire life painting polka dots. And her artist roots are in New York's Greenwich Village in the late 1950s and 1960s. Having come from Japan, Kusama moved to New York at the suggestion of a letter written to her by her mentor, painter Georgia O'Keeffe. She arrived at 70 East 12th Street in 1958. Kusama had grown up on her family's seed farm in Matsumoto, where she experienced hallucinations. These childhood visions led to infinity net paintings, fields of delicate wave-like brushstrokes, as well as dots and psychedelic patterns. The Infinity Net series were first shown at Brada Gallery in 1959 at 89 East 10th Street. The gallery was an artist cooperative. These galleries thrive through a truly democratic spirit. Only a few other women artists were in the mix, such as Louise Bourgeois and Marisol. Kusama's show was favorably reviewed in the New York Times. Yet, as a Japanese woman living in New York City not long after World War II, she faced considerable hardship and prejudice. She painted without heat at night, and sometimes ate from restaurant dumpsters. It was her more outrageous performances that captured the public and press attention. In the 1960s, Kusama staged public nudist orgies in Washington Square Park. In these happenings, friends and collaborators had their bodies painted with dots. Now, her dots adorn Grand Central Station with her new mosaic, "A Message to Love, Directly from My Heart unto the Universe." Yet back then, she believed that her male peers, including Lucas Samaras, Klaus Oldenburg, and Andy Warhol, were copying her work. She covered her studio windows to protect herself from spying, and this crisis led to a suicide attempt. On July 22, 1960, she jumped out of a window, but landed on a bicycle and survived. Lee Krasner, 46 East 8th Street. In 1942, the young, ambitious painter Lee Krasner moves in with artist Jackson Pollock. Scandalously, they will not marry until 3 years later, but shortly they will make art history together. As abstract expressionists, they radically redefine the language of painting, Krasner promotes Pollock's work while she develops her own. She has her first solo show at Betty Parsons' gallery. She was 43. She signs her paintings LK so that they are not gendered. She was born in 1908 in Brooklyn, New York, to a Russian Orthodox Jewish family who ran a fish, vegetable, and fruit stand. The youngest of 6 children, she becomes Lenore and then Lee. She will soon live the life of a 1930s liberated woman, true bohemian. Krasner toughed out Depression-era times, waitressed in Greenwich Village, and worked as an artist nude model. For years, she is employed painting murals for the WPA. She is in their union. Political protests lead to Krasner's arrest. She's unflinching. She boasts that she has been in some of the best jails in New York. As a teenager, she went to the only school that offered vocational art training to girls, Washington Irving High School. From there, she was one of a few to get a scholarship to go to the Women's Art School at Cooper Union. Yet, her formative studies were with the legendary teacher Hans Hofmann at his School of Art at 52 West 9th Street. She develops her own style. She befriends Piet Mondrian. They like to go to Cafe Society, a nightclub which features African-American acts, called the first truly integrated nightclub in America. Krasner dances with Mondrian. He enjoys the boogie-woogie piano players. She notes his unusual sense of rhythm. After Pollock's death, Krasner became a one-woman force, brilliantly managing his estate. She moved into his studio and made her own monumental, majestic works. She made her most powerful paintings at the end of her life and started a foundation that became a model for helping artists. Lynn Drexler would become a famous abstract painter, but she arrived alone in New York in late 1955, moving into the Evangeline, a Salvation Army boarding house for women at 123 West 13th Street. She came to the city to study with abstract expressionist Hans Hofmann, whose legendary art school had also nurtured many other great women artists: Lee Krasner, Pearl Fine, Louise Nevelson, and Mercedes Matter. Hofmann helps Drexler gain admittance to Hunter College Graduate School. Prominent artist Robert Motherwell is a mentor. He praises her as a pure painter. Her bright and colorful style evokes landscapes. She was born Lynn Mapp Drexler in southeastern Virginia in 1928. She always kept her southern drawl. In New York, she also made the scene at the Cedar Bar and at gallery openings. She met her husband, John Hultberg, an abstract painter, at an artist club Halloween party. They had a difficult relationship with his hard drinking and affairs. The couple traveled before returning to New York in 1969, settling into the storied Chelsea Hotel. There, Drexler supported herself by selling cushions with her handiwork. She shows at the legendary Tanager Gallery on East 10th Street alongside founder Lois Dodd. In 1963, the couple occupy a summer house on Monhegan Island, small and secluded, and 12 miles off the coast of Maine. Drexler creates hundreds of canvases. She exiled herself to the island year-round, braving the brutal winters with a few locals nearby. She lived there until the end of her life. She said, "I'd become a hermit, an eccentric." In her will, she left paintings to a few friends. She was never to return to New York. But her paintings did. After her death, her work has been rediscovered and given its due, and she has emerged a hero figure for her intense private journey. Greenwich Village was the scene. The club, 39 East 8th Street. It was a 33-foot by 60-foot third-story loft space, rented for $80 per month. Housed in a ticking factory, loose feathers flew around the stairway. They called it a place for artists. To make advanced art in the 1950s, you needed to talk about it. Clubs, restaurants, and bars is where that happened. Women had to fight for their rightful seat. Elaine de Kooning, Mercedes Matter, and Pearl Fine were early female members. More groundbreakers soon made their way. Hedda Stern, Helen Frankenthaler, Joan Mitchell, and Grace Hardigan all dropped in on the tight-knit The Club, a mostly male place for private discussion of New York's leading avant-garde. The ruling abstract expressionists held twice-a-week night meetings. Willem de Kooning, Ad Reinhardt, and Franz Klein ruled the roost behind the distinctive red-painted door. Ideas and ideology were served salon-style, along with hot coffee from stainless steel urns and whiskey from paper cups. Political theorist Hannah Arendt spoke there. So did avant-garde composer John Cage. Mercedes Matter started a drawing group that became the New York Studio School.
Joan Mitchell, 60 St. Mark's Place. Young abstract expressionist Joan Mitchell moves to this distinct East Village address in 1952, an apartment she maintains for much of the rest of her life. Mitchell had been living in Greenwich Village, close to the action at the Cedar Bar, the club, the San Remo. Noted painters Franz Klein and Norman Bloom are all close by, and she will soon befriend them. Mitchell is already known for her bold abstractions, with her slashing brushstrokes, violent and beautiful. She's gorgeous and tough. She's a hard drinker and always has a cigarette in hand. Fellow painter Grace Hardigan said, "I've never heard anyone swear like that." Born to a well-to-do family in Chicago, her father, a doctor, would bring her to museums when she was a girl. Her mother was an accomplished poet. Mitchell was a nationally ranked figure skater. She goes to Smith College as an English major and then to the School of Chicago Art Institute. Fresh to New York, her 6-foot square work is included in the influential 9th Street show. She's 26 years old. Her paintings already possess exuberance and purpose. At the opening of her show at the Stable Gallery in 1957, Mitchell dresses up and friends come to celebrate her. That same year, here in her St. Mark's Place apartment, Mitchell directs a famous editorial shoot. Rudy Burkhart showed Mitchell how to set up the lights and use a timer. She staged and took the photos of herself with his camera. The results of this remarkable collaboration are published in Art News magazine for an article by Irving Sandler, Mitchell Paints a Picture. Mitchell tells Sandler, "The freedom in my work is quite controlled." Mitchell will go on to spend much of her career in France, tending her garden and painting in Vetoul. These works also garner much praise, but Mitchell's reputation was made at a much earlier age, during her younger years, right here in New York's East Village.
Honestly, I can't get enough of these. These are just such beautifully, I mean, the images are gorgeous, and I just love it's like one of those PBS American Experience documentaries in these lovely bite-sized chunks. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of these amazing women and these really beautiful little mini documentaries. So one thing is, both of us in a way are kind of involved with preservation. Can you tell us a little bit about how this is similar yet different to like the work that village preservation does?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that On the Spot and Village Preservation are both engaging in a form of memorializing historic sites. Our form looks beyond traditional landmarks, buildings and plaques and statues, because we're celebrating cultural history, which is very difficult to preserve. So we create digital place markers. In the past, we might have imagined bronze plaques on buildings, but storytelling in video allows us to include sites of cultural significance or non-buildings, buildings that are long gone. And I'd like to point out Michael Kimmelman's recent New York Times article, and I'd like to quote him. He writes, quote, "Intangible heritage, or whatever we choose to call it, comes down to how we wish to define and enshrine our neighborhoods, our culture, and ourselves." And I think that's brilliant. And we hope that On the Spot and Village Preservation are contributing to that sense of place. We think of ourselves a little bit like an outdoor museum that brings intangible heritage to life. And we think, as I know you do too, that people want to connect personally and emotionally with history. And there's this wonderful sense of being on the very spot where history happened. That's so exciting. I'll tell you a little bit, which connects to that sense of being on the spot. Our origin story is that my co-founder, Tony Gans, who's a huge fan of Eva Hesse, walked by her studio on the Bowery, and there was nothing to identify or mark the building. And that's unfortunate because she's so important. However, as we talked about this, trying to convince New York landlords to allow us to put up commemorative plaques wasn't something that we were particularly interested in doing. But because actual plaques were too difficult, we decided to make short biographic videos and make them widely accessible. It was really a very simple idea. No plaques, no landlords, and we could make hundreds of them. Yeah, so that's our origin story.
Oh, amazing. I mean, this is why I love my job, because I get to work with like yourself and all these other folks in that cultural history and bringing the buildings to life, so to speak. But what is unique about this kind of short form video? Why do you feel that this is so impactful in bringing this kind of history to life?
Right. Well, we all know that short form video is how we all really want to get content these days, and we're all on our computers and phones all day long. The on the spot videos are only 2 to 3 minutes long, in part so that we can make hundreds of them. If we set out to make a 2-hour documentary on each woman, we wouldn't get very far. But this length holds a viewer's attention, which of course our attentions are getting shorter and shorter, but it's also long enough time to actually convey a great deal. And video allows us to see what the studios and the artists themselves looked like, right? I mean, this is the fascination of being able to see what's behind closed doors.
Yeah, and let's kind of like dive into this beautiful compilation that you were able to share with us and go in a little more in depth. What are some of the things that you feel we could tease out from these videos, some of the highlights?
Well, I mean, the Guerilla Girls, you featured them in your flyer, and they are our heroes. Playful, pointed, brilliant commentary. Their mission statement is very similar to ours. They're still very active. So that's one of my favorite videos. And then I'm so proud of obtaining the never before seen images inside the club. So these were taken by Fred McDara, who was the great chronicler of the art world back then in the 50s. But the entire contact sheet of images was scanned especially for us. So they'd never before been seen. And they really help you get a sense of what it looked like inside. You see the folding chairs, the coffee pot, the paper cups, and It's interesting. They all seem to have their coats on. I don't know if you noticed that, but it was probably freezing in there. They didn't have any money. And so if we turn to Yayoi Kusama, it's amazing to think that Kusama, who's now so famous, she's one of our top 5 selling artists, right? With windows in Madison Avenue for Louis Vuitton, that she was an immigrant, discriminated against because she was Japanese. Also incredible to think that she attempted suicide in that apartment. And she only survived because she happened to land on a bicycle. Lucky for us. Um, and finally, Joan Mitchell, who I know you have a soft spot for, at 60 St. Mark's. This too is a great archival moment of discovery for us because we were able to show all of the Mitchell photos from the photo shoot. So when you're looking, most everyone knows like the one iconic image of Mitchell looking right at the camera. She's young and beautiful in that photo shoot. She's holding her brushes, and behind her is the great painting. And this is accredited to Rudy Burkhart. But it was Mary Gabrielle, the author of Ninth Street Women, who discovered that Mitchell herself staged and took the photos with Burkhart's camera. So it wasn't, in fact, Burkhart who took the photos. And now Mitchell does get credit as joint photographer for those, but the photo shoot consists of almost 30 images. So we can run it like film. When you put them together in a video, you can almost watch her paint. So that's a kind of archival discovery that's really exciting for us in terms of bringing an artist to life. Yeah.
And the images are absolutely gorgeous. One of the other things that notice is like in each of the little separate videos, some of the same names kept popping up over and over. So there seemed to be a real sense of community. Can you talk a little bit more about that power of community for these women?
Yeah, no, that's very important. And I noticed it watching it this time too. There's this real sense of interconnectivity. And community is so important to what we're trying to do, the part of the story we're trying to tell. And there's certainly a good example of community in the Cedar Tavern and the club. The bars where these women ate and laughed and danced and debated till all hours is, something we're all probably a little bit nostalgic for, especially in this day and age, kind of post-pandemic and Facebook and Instagram. But it is important to, if we examine the club and the Cedar, to note that it was a heavily male-dominated places in the 1950s, and the Cedar was really rough and tumble, a misogynist place for women to even consider entering. You were brave to do so. It was a dive, and that's why they went there. They could afford it. And also few women were admitted to the club. We highlight those who were, but that was a handful. And you can see in the pictures, there's sort of one woman in each photo. But they all wanted to be included. They wanted a seat at the table. And artists and all of us need a space to share and debate and support each other. So in general, our videos do try to evoke a sense of community. And I guess another way they do it too is that, New York itself is a leading character in all of our videos. It's the one through line throughout them all. New York is a community. And we love using vintage film and photos of lost New York. So.
And what else was interesting in the video is the relationship that many of them had with men, but ended up being overshadowed by men like Lee Krasner and Lynn Drexler. Can you dive a little bit more into that?
Yeah, I mean, the work of, let's call it recovery, is not straightforward. So when we think about how to present women, we do so not in the context of the men as much, but rather try to look at their achievements. And we see that in Krasner, right? She was primarily seen in relationship to her husband, Jackson Pollock. And it's only in fairly recent years that her career has taken off. And as the video says, it was after her death that she was able to take over his large studio. Before that, she worked in a tiny little upstairs. And if anybody's visited Pollock Krasner, you can see that tiny little upstairs attic room was all she had. And she really gets her own room of one's own, her large studio, and was able for the first time to make works of real scale. And also later, what she did in the making of the Pollock Krasner Foundation is an extraordinary achievement, a kind of brilliance in and of itself, that I don't think she got a lot of credit for. But this is just to say that we recenter the narrative on Krasner and not so much on her relationship to Pollock. And what's interesting about Lynn Drexler is that she had very little recognition during her lifetime as an artist. And so she's probably more typical of most women artists. I love that she lived in a Salvation Army house for women on 13th Street. I mean, wish those places were still around, that safe havens, inexpensive. But then she retreated to extreme isolation, living on a tiny island in obscurity. And it's really sad to think that she only made it after her death.
But now these are absolutely fantastic. So just taking a look at the time first, Loretta, a huge thank you for sharing your perspectives and giving us the chance to share these beautiful videos. Folks, if you have not been to the website, after this, spend the weekend, go explore. These are such awesome little films. But now we would love to take questions from the audience. And I'm just going to skim here in the chat. I feel like I saw a couple of questions. Because first, there are just so many comments of people who loved the videos. Yeah, here we have someone asking if you could share with us your first art experience as a child. How did you yourself get into the arts, Loretta?
Well, I mean, my mother was a writer, and we lived in Greenwich Village, and it was all around us in some way. But I do have a kind of wonderful story. At Village Community School, my classmate Morgan Hare's mother, Denise Hare, was a photographer, had invited some of the children in our tiny little VCS class to go to an opening at Cooper Union of Joseph Cornell's. And it was Dory Ashton, who was also a classmate, Sasha Yunker's mother. So we all went, and it was because Cornell didn't want adults. He didn't like grown-ups. And the New York Times did a great feature of the opening didn't have wine and cheese. It had cherry soda and brownies for the kids. And I mean, that was kind of a wonderful childhood experience to have been at Joseph Cornell's opening at Cooper Union at, age 9 or something. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, other folks, other questions, please go ahead. But On This Spot has a wonderful collection, and we've highlighted here, from our neighborhoods, village preservation neighborhoods. And this may be kind of a mean question, but is there like a particular one that's like a favorite of yours, no matter where it is within New York?
Right. Well, yes. I mean, the what I realized, so the way William and I curated this is we had done a webinar with Village Preservation some time ago showing other videos, and so we wanted to show totally fresh videos that were also located in the village. But some of the ones that women that you haven't heard of, so the way the cookie crumbled this time was that we were showing sort of quite famous women, but some of my favorites are the women that you've never heard of, right? So if you look at the Mine Okubo one, she was a Japanese American who did not speak Japanese, had never been to Japan, and she was in the internment camps and came back to Greenwich Village afterwards and did what may be one of the first graphic novels. And it's an account of the camps, and it is it's brilliant, and she's brilliant, and very few people have heard of her. And so too Selma Burke, who was a Black sculptor who had a school of fine art and was very, very well trained, had spent time in Paris, and was commissioned to do FDR's portrait, which was then translated onto the dime, but she never got credit for it. I mean, it's an extraordinary story, right? So, in our pocket, we have Selma Burke's work, and she never got credit for it. So, but yeah, it's the women you haven't heard of that we're most proud of. And when we talk about the work of sort of recovery of these stories, that's where we get really excited.
And each of these videos is so gorgeous. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that goes into it? Just the production, the research?
Yeah, I mean, in order to set our parameters, we try to keep it to just the location, a location, right? Because artists are itinerant, and that's difficult. But you want to pinpoint one location and give it some scope or parameters, because otherwise you don't have limitations. We are archivally searching in every corner. I mean, it's so exciting when we find footage that hasn't before been seen, or sometimes we ask, even if the footage has been seen, do you have any outtakes that no one has seen? Or in the case of the contact sheets, that's really wonderful. You might see one image because magazines and newspapers. I mean, for instance, we're working on one from Maya Lin, and Maya said there's no photos of me in my Bowery studio. But there was this one New York Times. So we looked at the one New York Times article, found the photographer, asked her to go back and scan. Now we have 3 pages of contact sheets of Maya in her Bowery studio. So it's that kind of work. So we put together rough cuts, and then we have you heard Joan Allen, who is the actress recording a lot of our season 1 narrations. We have professional recordings, and then we go to post-production, and there's a whole legal team. Every single photo has to be cleared legally, and then insurance bought. So I hope that answers your question.
It just to appreciate the amount of work, even though it's only 2-3 minutes, how much work does go into putting it together. And then we have a question here. Could you envision collaborating with documentary filmmakers to produce longer films going more into depth to explore groups of artists or individuals?
Sure. I mean, yeah, collaborate with, yeah, the sort of tension or the sweet spot, whichever way you want to look at it, that we choose to keep the stories very, very short so that we can do so many of them. And as we work neighborhood by neighborhood, we try to do 15 to 18 in every neighborhood and cover Manhattan. So we're literally talking about hundreds of stories and unearthing aspects, again, it's like from a feminist perspective. So there's so many examples, but we're working now on a Susan Weil video. Susan Weil was married to Robert Rauschenberg. It was actually Susan who brought the blueprint process to that relationship when they were married. And so essential to Rauschenberg's production is the indexical image, right? But the photo shoot by Life magazine shows him as the creator, right? She's literally not in the photos, you know. So just pointing out some of those, it's a flipping the script, right?
So we have another one here. I deeply appreciate your video about Camille Billups and your policy of making these videos available for free. Can you tell us a little bit more how you fund the work and you know some of the resources that you pull together to put this amazing project together?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you saw the Billups Hatch Loft. It was a Black salon in SoHo, and an extraordinary repository for Black artists. And all of those archives are um, at Emory, and more work should be done on that project. And the Billups Hatch archive was just enormously generous with us, and excited that we were interested and turned over their archives to us, that's a dream come true for us to be able and most of that material has not been seen. So that's truly, truly wonderful. But so I'm sorry. So the second part of that question was
You know, some of the funding and or the
the
resources that
funding.
help
That's so
support
hard.
the
It's
project.
so hard. I mean, we work on a skeletal staff. There's no bricks and mortar. A lot of the staff is volunteer. We really, we have some private funding, and our website has all of the grants we've gotten. We have wonderful partners, and we have, Helen Frankenthaler Foundation and Andy Warhol and Bloomberg Philanthropies, and mostly individuals, though. Even the smallest donation helps. And so it's difficult, is the answer, and ongoing. And yet we've been lucky, and we have a lot of terrific supporters. And I think the more people that know about us and appreciate what we're doing will sort of help that part of things too.
I just want to second this comment here. Someone says, please see all of this on This Spot NYC's videos and support this profoundly brilliant history of art. So here
Wow.
to that comment.
Thank you. Thank you.
If there are no more questions from the audience, I'll ask this last one. Tell us a little bit about some of your future projects. You mentioned some of the other artists that you're working on, but how do you see this project growing and developing in the years to come?
Well, it's a mapping project, if you will, right? So, I mean, it is neighborhood by neighborhood. So the development is pretty clearly delineated. We move through the city, and so much happens downtown, but we are moving uptown. So this year we are Lower East Side, Bowery, Chinatown, and we're profiling Collab and Kiki Smith and Adrian Piper and Godzilla, the Asian Arts Network, and Eva Hesse. And then next year is TriBeCa, and then Chelsea. But we're pushing upwards. So that's how we're moving. And and we have our work cut out for us. But there's so many stories. And please, if anybody, I saw Tanya Grossman's name. She wouldn't be a candidate. She's not an artist. There's so many wonderful women who are dealers and critics and gallerists, but we have, it's hard to contain this as is, so we couldn't include people that fall outside of that. But if you do have recommendations for artists, especially those that we might not have heard of, we learned about Mineo Kubo through someone at Village Preservation.
Oh.
So that kind of tip, and if you do have that kind of suggestion, an address is incredibly helpful, because a lot of times being able to locate them on the map and know where to actually place the women is so critical to us, and it's not always readily available information. So, but yes, please send suggestions.
Fantastic. Well, Loretta, A huge, huge thank you for spending this time with us this evening, sharing your wonderful perspective and the chance to highlight these beautiful videos and these incredible women. Everyone, I'm sure many of you have already seen these fantastic videos. If you haven't, thank you those folks who shared the website on this spot nyc.org. We'll be sharing that link as well in the follow-up email to this evening's program. Tell your friends, your family, people on the street to go and check out on this spot nyc.org and learn more about this incredible project, about these incredible women. Loretta, again, a huge thank you.
Oh, huge thank you to you and Village Preservation. Your work, you inspire us. You really do. And your partnership means the world to us. Thank you very much for this opportunity, truly.
Cheers, cheers. And thank you to our wonderful audience. We always love you joining us for our programs. We really appreciate it. Go out, watch these videos, and appreciate this magnificent city that we get to live in. Until our next program, stay warm, everyone, and I wish you a very, very good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.